Hello, I'm Samantha Hussey. I'm a member of Hope Church in Cwmaman, and it's my absolute privilege to share with you this morning and to bring the first sermon from our series where we are social distancing, where we're all at home. Isn't it wonderful that we've got the technology to be able to be together while we're at home on our own? So thank you to everybody who's involved in organising that. And it is Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day. We usually, as a church, honour our ladies in the church on this day, and we usually say thank you to you, whether you're mothers or not. And so we want to, as a church, on behalf of Pastor Dale and the church, just say happy Mother's Day to you. Thank you, ladies, for being wonderful members of our church. Thank you for being wonderful servants, and we do have a little something for you. So once we're all back to normal, once this has passed, make sure you come and see Dale. Good morning to you. If you've commented, if you're logged into YouTube, you can comment on the video, you can let us know that you're here. It's wonderful to see you this morning. So at the moment, obviously all church activities are off at the moment. We do have food bank running, which is on a Wednesday morning. You'll need a red voucher, or you'll need to have been referred by the DWP. If you need more information on that, give Helen a shout or contact the church. They are running on skeleton staff, so please don't call in for coffee or for Let's Talk. Just go if you need to go for food bank. It is on Thursday, a very special day. It's Caitlin's birthday. She's going to be 11. Happy birthday, Caitlin. Unfortunately, I don't have the birthday kangaroo. Unfortunately, that would be really good, wouldn't it, to have the kangaroo hopping along. But anyway, I don't have it. So happy birthday to you, Caitlin, for Thursday. If anybody wants to send Gemma a text or a message on Facebook to say happy birthday to her, Thursday is the day. She's going to be 11. And also on Thursday is Stacey and G's wedding anniversary. So happy anniversary to you. As I'm on my own here, I'm not going to sing happy birthday and I'm not going to sing happy anniversary. So you'll have to imagine that. Okay. Now we are halfway through our 1540 challenge, where we're praying for the 40 days of Lent for 15 minutes a day. So if you are taking part in that, it would be helpful just to add our NHS, our government, our health workers to that. Pray for protection over our church family, over our village. Just keep going with that. I believe we're going to see great things from that challenge. Stay connected with us while we're not meeting together at church. We've got our YouTube channel, we've got our Facebook page, we've got a new WhatsApp group. If you want adding to that, give us a shout at the church or contact Stacey. She can add you to that group. So I'll turn to our sermon now. As you can see from the slide, my title is Hidden in the House of God. And I thought, because it was Mother's Day, I would talk about a lady who was a wonderful aunt. And she became a wonderful foster mother. And I'm going to talk about her, her husband, and the boy that she raised. So I'm going to read from 2 Kings 11. The story goes over 2 Kings 11 to chapter 12. And it also is referenced in 2 Chronicles chapter 22 and chapter 23. But I'm just going to start reading from 2 Kings 11 for the minute. And bear with me, because some of the names are a bit tricky. Been practicing though. So it's entitled Queen Athaliah Rules in Judah. When Athaliah, the mother of King Ahaziah of Judah, learned that her son was dead, she began to destroy the rest of the royal family. But Ahaziah's sister, Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram, took Ahaziah's infant son Joash and stole him away from among the rest of the king's children who were about to be killed. She put Joash and his nurse in a bedroom, and they hid him from Athaliah, so the child was not murdered. Joash remained hidden in the temple of the Lord for 6 years, while Athaliah ruled over the land. Sorry, Athaliah. I told you I've been practicing, but obviously not enough. In the 7th year of Athaliah's reign, Jehoiada the priest summoned the commanders, Karaite mercenaries, and the palace guards to come to the temple of the Lord. He made a solemn pact with them and made them swear an oath of loyalty there in the Lord's temple. Then he showed them the king's son. He goes on to describe how he sets a guard of bodyguards around the king, or around the king's son, and then they crown him. In verse 12 it says, Then Jehoiada brought out Joash the king's son, placed the crown on his head and presented him with a copy of God's laws. They anointed him and proclaimed him king, and everyone clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the king." We'll come back to that story a little bit more later on and find out what happened. But I picked out of this story, I know Mother's Day is not really the best day to be talking about in infanticide, but apparently this is what we've got today. So this is what the Lord has given me, and I've picked out a few points that we can look at, and I've got 4 P's because we know we like them all to have alliteration or some kind of rhyme. So my first P is purpose. God calls us for a purpose, and this story just shows this perfectly. Jesus is called the Lion of Judah. Now this story is the line of Judah. There was a promise to King David that from his line the Messiah would be born. And this is the family line that we're talking about in this story. Now Jehoshaphat, she changed the trajectory of the royal family. She broke the cycle of evil, and she ensured that God's promise was fulfilled. God had a plan for Jehoshaphat before she was even born. God had a plan for Joash before he was even born. God's plan was for Jesus to be born of King David's line. And he knew what Athaliah would do. So he placed Jehoshaphat exactly where he needed her. Joash, later on in the chapter in the scriptures, we learn that he not only repaired the temple, but he restored the temple. He restored the priests and the ceremonies and the worship, and he restored it to its original design as set out by God to Moses. 2 Kings 12, the next chapter, it tells that Joash commanded the money to be collected by taxes to pay for the repairs to the temple. But there was no accounting needed. The money was paid directly to the workers because they acted with complete honesty. I bet Pam would love that, wouldn't she? To have no accounting to do in the church because everybody acted with complete honesty. And I'm sure we do act with complete honesty. But in today's day and age, we have to keep that account, don't we? We need to prove that we have been honest with the money. God placed each person in this story, in this time, with a purpose. From the workers who restore the temple, to Joash, to Jehoshaphat, to Jehoiada, her husband. Her actions, Jehoshaphat's actions, resulted in 137 years straight of good kings. And the books of kings, they're, so-and-so was a good king, so-and-so was a bad king, so-and-so was a good king, so-and-so was a bad king. There has never been such a time period of good kings all in one line. And they weren't perfect, but they weren't bad. They were good. And on the whole, they followed God's commandments and God's kingdom. And that is because God placed each person in this story for a purpose. And my second P, as you can see, is protection. Now, it's commonly regarded that Jezebel was the mother of Queen Athaliah. Jezebel, as we know, she slaughtered priests of the Lord. She destroyed temples. She used her influence to further establish the worship of Baal, who was a Canaanite god of sun and storms. She installed priests and altars. She even had her husband build a temple to Baal in Samaria. In 2 Kings 9, King Joram demanded, "Do you come in peace, Jehu?" And Jehu replied, "How can there be peace as long as the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel are all around us?" And that's the mother of Athaliah, their queen. And she was the only queen in this time of biblical history. She was the only queen during the time of kings. Queen Athaliah then was an evil queen who instructed her son to do evil things. I can't even imagine that. Somebody instructing their child to do evil things. But 2 Chronicles 22 verse 3 says his mother encouraged him in wrongdoing. Now Queen Athaliah, she sought to wipe out Judah's line. And just as it seemed that darkness has won, Jehoshaphat sprung into the purpose of God. And she did exactly what God needed her to do. Her actions chose a different path for Joash than his destructive upbringing and his family history would suggest. He was the youngest child of the king. His father had been instructed in doing evil things. His grandmother was instructing in these evil things. His great-grandmother did evil things. But because of Jehoshaphat's actions in bringing him into the house of God, hiding him in the temple for those 6 years, he changed. his actions changed, his history changed, his path changed because of that. And she didn't save Joash and then send him off to live with someone else. She raised him as her own. She felt the burden of her actions and she shouldered them. She protected him from Baal, from these false gods. She filtered what he was exposed to. Psalm 91 verse 9 is my life verse, my absolute favourite verse. And at the moment, there's a lot of people quoting Psalm 91 with the coronavirus and the pandemic that's going on. But I just want to pick out this one verse. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And the secret place of the Most High is talking about the heart of God. It's talking about right at the centre of the tabernacle. The place where people weren't allowed to go. Only the priests were allowed to go. But Jesus, in dying, in coming back to life, in drawing us near, he has given us access to that secret place of the Most High. He has enabled us personally to draw near to God. And the shadow of the Almighty, it refers to the protection that a shadow would bring. And in desert lands, a shadow isn't a dark and scary place like we might think. It's a place of rest. It's a place of protection. So I think from that verse, in today's translation, we could pull this verse out as Jesus is our rest in times of trouble. And there's an old hymn, I absolutely love it. And if Graham was here with me, he would start singing this right now. He would sing, Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. Just hide me, O Lord, so that I can learn more about you. Joash was hidden in a place of rest where he could grow and he could be taught and he could fulfill his destiny. And at the crucial time when he was old enough to be crowned, he needed the protection of the guards. He was only a 7-year-old boy when he was crowned. He reigned for 40 years. And while he was under the instruction of Jehoiada, the priest, he did right by God. Now, our third point is presence. And this leads on to this nicely. Who you surround yourself with influences you. At the moment, we could so easily be influenced by the news coverage, by the media, by the panic and the anxiety. But who you surround yourself with influences you. There's another old hymn, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. And it says, turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. And I'm not promising you that you won't have any anxiety or any fear, but if you focus on God, his light, his glory will just eclipse all of the worries and the anxieties we have. 2 Kings 12, it says, all his life, Joash did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight because Jehoiada the priest instructed him. And if you read on further, you'll see that he didn't destroy the altars to the false gods. He focused on the temple of the Lord. And later on, he goes on to kill Jehoiada's son, who tries to advise him. Now, he grew up with Jehoiada's children. And he killed somebody that he grew up as a brother with. But it shows that although he did right while Jehoiada was advising him, godly teachers can only teach us what we want to receive. We must be receptive to receiving the teaching from our teachers, from God, from those that we respect. But Joash didn't mature as he should have. And while he did what was right in God's sight while Jehoiada was alive, as soon as Jehoiada died, he started to do what was wrong in God's sight. Our growth in God is not totally dependent on the teachers we have. And even if we have the most God-fearing and anointed pastors or ministers teaching us, such as Dale, obviously, we can still make the wrong choices and become a people that we shouldn't be. But we must mature in God by allowing his teachings to change our hearts. I don't know whether Joash knew who he was as he grew up. 2 Chronicles 23 tells us about Jehoiada's sons. It doesn't tell us that he had daughters, but I'm sure he did. At that time, the temple wasn't really in use. As soon as Athaliah came to power, she stopped worship of the temple of the Lord. But the priest doesn't answer to the queen, and neither do we. We answer to God. And so the priest never stopped. Even though the temple wasn't in use, Jehoiada the priest, he didn't stop. He didn't stop serving God. And the world might think that our God is not needed at the moment, but our God is always needed, and he is always at work, whether we can see it or not. 2 Chronicles 23, and this is from the New International Version. In the first verse it says, "In the 7th year, Jehoiada showed his strength. He made a covenant with the commanders of the units of 100. And do you know what that verse tells me? Never underestimate a man of God or a woman of God. Never underestimate what somebody can do when they are doing God's purpose. The priests and the Levites, they were the only ones allowed in the temple at that time. So at the time of the coronation, they were the ones guarding the king's son. And Jehoiada died at the age of 130, and he was buried in the tombs of the kings in the city of David because of the way he had served. But Joash, he left the will of God. And when he died, he was buried in the city of David, but he wasn't buried in the tombs of the kings because he left God's will. Finally, my final P is promise. And I looked up what their names mean, and Jehoiada means the Lord knows. The Lord knows what we're going through at the moment. The Lord knows what Queen Athaliah was going to do. The Lord knew the family line they had. The Lord knows. Joash means given by the Lord. He was given by the Lord. He was delivered from the death caused by his grandmother. He was saved for a purpose. And his purpose might not just have been to restore the temple. His purpose was purely to carry on the line of David so that Jesus would be born of David's line and fulfill that promise. There are so many prophecies about Jesus. And this one action by Jehoshaphat, she's not mentioned anywhere else, just in this one story. Jehoshaphat, she fulfilled the promise of God. She ensured that Jesus would be born as promised, as fulfilled. And Jehoshaphat means the Lord's oath, or Jehovah has sworn. And whether she knew it or not, she fulfilled the promise of her name. She saved the promise of God. And she's gone down in history through the New Testament for this one time when she acted. She did what God needed her to do. She worked with courage. She worked with bravery. She fulfilled the promise of her name. 6 years the people were praying for. 6 years of living under an evil queen, praying for the line of Judah to be restored. 6 years they were praying for deliverance. And whether it says that or not, the people were praying. If you put God's people in a time of difficulty, they will be praying. Same as we're praying through our 1540 challenge. And that's why we must continue to pray, because God has made us a promise. God has made us a promise that he will sustain us. And we must pray. Behind the scenes, though, a little boy was coming of age. And I can't imagine for 6 years praying for deliverance from this evil queen, thinking that nothing was happening, nothing was coming. But it was behind the scenes. This little boy was learning. He was being taught. He was growing up. He was coming of age. And maybe it needed that 6 years of an evil queen for the guards to be at a point to have suffered so much by the queen's hand that they were then ready to swear an oath and risk their lives for the king's son. God made a promise that the Messiah would be born of David's line. And this small one verse in the Bible, it's only one verse, shows how one woman, a princess, she was the wife of a priest, how she worked a small part to see God's promise fulfilled. We are living in a very bizarre world at the moment. I just want to say to you, stay kind, keep praying, serve God where you can, from where you are. But above all, trust that the promises of God that we read every day in our scriptures, that we learn about, they are just as true now as they were 2,000 years ago. Stay connected with us. Keep commenting in Facebook, on our page, in the Facebook group, in the WhatsApp group. If you're not part of those and you want to be part of them, contact us, please. Just be part of us. And Dale is going to keep doing Tuesday night messages. They'll be on our Facebook page. If we can get them on the YouTube channel, we will. We just look forward to seeing you in person again when all of this is over. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye.